Good evening, and thank you once again for the opportunity to be here. I'd hope that this year we could have done this in person, but I guess we have to still wait for a few more months for the pandemic situation to be in full control. I am Praveen Bhadada, Managing Partner at Zinnov, and for inclusion purpose, I am a North Indian male. I have a receding hairline, and I'm wearing a blue checkered shirt today. I'm going to talk to you about one of the emerging trends within digital commerce, and that is of the direct to consumer or D2C business. India's domestic consumption has nearly doubled in the last 10 years and has in fact skyrocketed specifically in the last 5. This is the first time in history that we have near equal representation of all generations, including baby boomers, Gen Z, Gen Y, and Gen X, and consumption is consistently increasing across all these segments. Older generations are perhaps looking for value for money products, while younger ones are going crazy about newer experiences. You only live once generation is consuming ruthlessly, versus you only have one life generation is spending only on cruelty-free and sustainable products. Consumption in tier 2 and tier 3 cities is growing at a much faster pace compared to tier 1 metro markets on the back of increased disposable income and penetration of mobile internet. Retail channels are the primary source for citizens to buy their consumables, and that is increasingly getting organized and even more sophisticated. Most recent events of COVID, the massive investments on digital infrastructure in the last decade, and the advent of players like Jio in the market have pushed a large part of our population, about 200 million people, towards online shopping, which is now already a $40 billion plus industry in India. Role of digital medium in consumption market is a trend shaping up for last 25 years. The early phases were largely centered around discovery platforms that were just taking off in early 2000s during the internet boom. Platforms like Just Dial and IndiaMart largely played the role of discovery platforms and connected buyers with sellers. As the number of listings increased, the utility of these platforms started winding down. A handful of sellers used paid listings for better visibility to end customers, while most others continue to struggle to see any meaningful business impact by just being listed on these platforms. In the late 2000s, e-commerce started picking up in a big way and enabled consumers to not just find the sellers, but to also transact with them through the same platform experience. Companies like Amazon and Flipkart scaled massively in this period. This was followed by the rise of social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, as well as WhatsApp. The easy-to-use interfaces and presence of large base of consumers resulted into more frequent transactions via these platforms. Companies like Meesho grew rapidly on the back of connecting buyers and sellers via the WhatsApp platform. In the next phase, sellers started looking at digital technology to be able to build their direct consumer channel apart from relying only on aggregators such as Amazon and Flipkart. In many cases, in fact, sellers started facing a lot of friction from the aggregator platform as well. The direct channel allowed them to gain better insights on customer needs and deliver better experiences for them. Building websites and e-commerce storefronts along with mobile applications started taking off in this period. While most businesses are going through this natural evolution from listing services to their own storefronts, there's this growing breed of brands who got set up as a digital native brand right from their inception and who have been relying on online channels for majority of their customer acquisition and revenue generation. This is a new segment of direct to consumer or D2C that is reshaping the e-commerce business both in the global as well as in the Indian markets. In fact, India currently already has over 1,000 D2C brands, which has really increased rapidly over the last 5 years. If you just look at venture investment, venture capitalist funding into this segment, they definitely are seeing this as a big opportunity. and have already poured in over $2.5 billion in the last 6 years. There's secular growth of D2C brands across all major segments, including electronics, fashion, food and beverage, beauty and personal care, and home furnishing, etc. This has also resulted in at least three Indian companies in the D2C and the D2C allied spaces acquiring the coveted unicorn status. Now, this is a very interesting slide which really shows how real this D2C trend is. These are some illustrious D2C brands, and some of which you can definitely recognize. And what we've done here is to really portray their estimated timelines to reach the 200 crore or $25 million in revenue profile. The fact that many D2C brands are hitting these milestones in a matter of few years indicates the growing prowess and relevance of the D2C space. Many of these D2C brands were successful in identifying a very niche demand segment that was not met by mainstream brands in terms of either product, market, or even channels, but could now be fulfilled through the online channel. And by addressing this market opportunity, D2C brands have emerged as a strong challenger to established legacy brands, who have so far, in our observation, they've not been very successful in catching up to the speed, the momentum of the most favored D2C brands in the country. Just taking my own personal example for a minute, right? Over the last 11 months, I have made purchase decisions on 50 plus products and services for my daily needs. Interestingly, 27 of these were from brands that did not exist 5 years ago. Moreover, 25 of them were brands that were digital native and were primarily selling through digital channels such as website, Instagram, or Facebook, etc. Why are consumers like me going after such D2C brands? One would wonder. I reflected on my own behavior, and I also interviewed several friends, family, and other members in the society to really found a few drivers. I really found a few drivers in this process. First, many D2C brands lead with novelty and authenticity in design and even utility of the products and services that they are selling. Sometimes the offering are so appealing that customers end up buying these just for novelty, irrespective of whether they need it or not at that point in time. Customer experience is another big factor, and D2C brands are doing a great job in quality, packaging, and personalization of the products. There's a big push around sustainable, cruelty-free, and circularity-oriented products. There's a section of the market, of the consumer base, which is definitely attracted and is passionate about protecting the planet. Many D2C brands are latching onto the space and the associated opportunities that come with it. Moreover, the purchase experience on most D2C brands is absolutely frictionless. Hassle-free selections, frictionless payments, no questions asked returns, cash and delivery. There's nothing that D2C brands have not borrowed from established e-commerce companies in the bet towards giving the customers the best purchase experience that they can get anywhere. Unbelievable amount of creativity is flowing in towards luring more and more consumers through creative marketing and branding, so much so that D2C brands are becoming the dream destination for all marketers. Lastly, D2C brands are also not really cheap, but they deliver what they promise. In fact, most of the times they end up delivering what they promise to the consumers. So these are some of the drivers in my observation, which is why the D2C brands are really rising in the market. Now, in addition to rising consumer demand, there are a few other drivers that make it interesting for D2C brands to participate in the opportunity. Legacy brands focus quite heavily on consumer research to sell a portfolio of their products to same customers. Have to build several physical stores to be able to attract customers and invest in multiple on-the-ground distribution channels, as a result of which the brands end up taking a severe margin hit. On the other hand, online brands are targeting a very niche market, and a lot of their research is based on just user trials. They don't invest in physical setups and do not have to deal with complexities associated with the distribution model. They care for a good warehousing and logistic partner, and they're all set. Some of the ambitious brands eventually take an omni-channel approach and are able to lure their loyal customers to even walk into their physical stores without, again, really spending nothing on marketing budgets, thereby capturing a bigger pie of the customer wallet. Also, given the secular nature of these trends and drivers, even in the global markets, some of the Indian D2C brands are in fact already putting their strategies to go global. In contrast, imagine, right, planning for a global expansion for a legacy brand. It might take years together for any of those established brands to think of global expansion. So, what does a good D2C brand do differently versus others? Like that becomes the ultimate next question, right? And again, there are a few observations that I've made here. One, many of the D2C brands actually offer differentiation and they target micro segments like we discussed, right? They really go after very niche segments of the market. D2C brands often use best of breed technology stacks. They don't compromise on technology. D2C brands also tend to put a much larger emphasis on individual products as opposed to going to market with an extensive assortment. Sometimes you would see just one or two SKUs that the brand is selling, but they are doing a real good job in making those one or two SKUs reach the ultimate customer. D2C brands also utilize constant user feedback to improve their marketing and product. D2C brands focus on creating long-term relationships that drive repeat purchases from the same customers. And I've also seen that D2C brands see themselves as media companies, right? They use content as their core strategy. They use social media content, website content as a way to speak to their audiences and create personalized shopping experiences for each and every one of their customers. Let me talk a little bit in details about a couple of these drivers just to give you some additional perspectives. And as part of this study, we analyzed a whole range of D2C companies across segments. And we figured that there are certain key differentiators that these brands are able to effectively leverage to scale fast. Take, for example, consumer electronics, one of the big categories where a lot of these D2C companies are coming up, right? You must have all heard of companies like Boat. And Boat is able to ride on their design novelty and celebrity involvement to find the customer base that they're finding today. They're also using the customer community inputs that they receive wholesomely on their digital properties to quickly design and build new products that suit the market demand. Fashion companies, on the other hand, are riding the wave of cruelty-free products, which are selling hot these days. In food and beverage category, it's all about giving real-time choices to customers, delivering those choices in the shortest possible time and with the highest quality. Brands like Licious have been able to leverage this to their advantage and have risen to being one of the only 3 unicorn brands in the D2C segment. Beauty and care is absolutely an interesting category. There's a lot of information arbitrage in this segment. There's a lot of consumer aspiration that is at play in this segment, and basis which many brands are able to command the price premium that they're getting today in this category. The other category is home furnishing, for example, and companies in this segment are blending products with full managed services to provide its consumers or customers an end-to-end holistic quality experience. So you would notice, right, depending on which sector that these D2C brands are coming in, they have a very different, sometimes common, but largely different playbook to be able to stay relevant and to be able to appeal to the customer base that they're going after. Now, let's also talk about the second driver, which is really technology. And a large part of this D2C business is oriented towards and is driven by technology. And you would imagine that different levels of maturity of the D2C brands that we have today in India, it invariably means that their technology adoption will also go through a logical evolution across core infra solutions, which are really targeted towards getting the merchant started, all the way down to merchant solutions, which really enables merchants to run their operations a lot more effectively. So there's this front-end core infra solution, there's back-end merchant solutions that are both at play in powering the journey, the technology journey of the D2C brands. Now, truly successful D2C brands think of technology in the form of a full commerce operating system or commerce OS or a fully integrated suite of digital solutions that can power the journey across all the stages. In fact, they think of three different stages in their evolution. The first one for most of these D2C brands is really building their dream, right? Really building their vision in terms of what do they want to do with their presence on D2C. The second one is all about doing the first few transactions, right? Getting the first few customers to come to you and transact with you. And the last one is of obviously, scaling, being successful in the commerce journey. Along these three stages of evolution, brands keep grappling with some basic questions such as, is there a better way to discover and attract customers on my platform? Can I sell across all kinds of multi-channel platforms that are available? How can I reduce friction in the transaction process? Can I also personalize my products and services for my customers? How can I drive my customers to be more loyal to me? Technologies that are able to provide an easy solution to all the merchant needs and are invested in success of merchants are winning over technologies that just barely stop at being transactional with the merchants. The fact is that if the world were perfect today, if we were living in a perfect scenario today, D2C brands would not even want to worry about technology and would assume that it will get taken care of while they focus on expanding their business. Let's look at a couple of successful D2C brands and really try and understand at a high level how their journey has unfolded, right? And I've taken three distinct examples. The first one is Country Delight. It's a milk tech company. That's a new category of company that's picking up in India. This started as a milk subscription provider. The idea for them was to start building a farm to table business, right? And this was built on two broad tenets. The first one being that the product should be a natural product in its original form. And the second one was that the product should be really fresh, right? And in both of these tenets, the important part is that the product should be fully cold chain enabled so that there's no need for preservatives to be added at the time of delivery. It in fact took a while for Country Delight to communicate with the customers, to know how the customer perceives their product, how the customer even consumes their product, and eventually what's their feedback on what they have consumed. And all of this eventually led to the re-engineering and the creation of the innovative product and service that Country Delight is delivering today. All of this was clubbed with a very easy to use application, a mobile application, a very intuitive website UI, and a very strong customer engagement platform that eventually resulted into a very high customer acquisition for them, but more importantly, even a very high customer retention footprint for a brand like Country Delight. Another example, we talked about it briefly, was Boat, which focuses on unique electronic product designs with focus on affordable and fashionable, electronics that they can provide to consumers. Unlike many electronic brands that ended up being only marketing companies in the past, while a lot of the design and even the core manufacturing processes were actually all outsourced to some place in China, Taiwan, parts of India, etc. Boat actually took a little bit of a different approach by keeping design in-house, and all the design was actually based on very deep customer analytics from the early customers that they were getting. Boat conducts sales via their own online platform and a marketplace distribution, and has recently also expanded to offline markets, so truly going into an omni-channel, both online and offline world, and they are doing the offline world through a third-party distribution network as well. They've managed in this process to build a very strong online community and a loyalty reward program, which is helping them in sales acceleration as well. At this point, they're already a 700-800 crore revenue business, and based on the last data I read, they were the 5th largest wearable brand globally. That's such a feat to achieve for an Indian brand in such a short period of time. In fact, in April, Boat had partnered with 6 Indian Premier League teams as their official audio partner, and you would have all seen advertisements featuring prominent cricketers like KL Rahul, Rishabh Pant, Hardik Pandya, Shikhar Dhawan, many others who are now associated with a brand like Boat. It's a very interesting evolution story. The third one I want to talk to you about is Lenskart, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. They are an interesting example of an Indian brand scaling to global markets on the back of its product and marketing innovations. As you know, they are in the business of selling heavily customized frames with micro precision glasses, and they in fact today carry at least 45 different variations of high quality lenses and a selection of more than 5,000 glass frames of different shapes as per the latest fashion and top quality. Lenskart has made its group of member stylists and designers that are constantly coming up with latest trends and fashions that support the design of their frames and glasses. On the consumer side, right, where they actually sell these frames and glasses, they use a 3D virtual try-on technology to provide look and feel experiences to its customers before making a purchase. The company sticks to an inventory business model where equal acquisition is done from India and China at the moment. They also have a ruthless focus on on-time delivery, after-sales service. And on the back of all this innovation, all this product quality and service quality, they're now able to scale presence to about 120 cities. At the last count, about 500 of their own stores in the omni-channel kind of a model, and roughly about 5 million happy customers, some of which are now also coming from different global markets, not just in India. Right. So again, a very good story of a brand that has sequentially scaled on the top of, on the back of niche focus and a lot of technology investments to be able to get to a certain size and scale in the market. Now, if you think of, these stories, unlike these success stories, it's in general very hard for any D2C brand to go through this journey by themselves, right? Technology is complicated at this point. They may be good in doing business, but they certainly are not yet the best in understanding technology as it relates to their business. This is a key gap that companies like Mensa Brands are bridging. You might have heard of them as a company that's kind of getting a lot of visibility off late. Their platform intelligently identifies D2C brands that are just about expanding their orbit and provides them technology tools across sales, order, supply, all with the intent of helping them optimize operations and provide superior customer experiences. They focus on creating a significant brand presence of the companies they acquire and also help them with channel expansion so these brands can sell across large, horizontal, vertical, and global marketplaces. Mensa identified a key gap in this market, and through its innovative approach, it has now become one of the fastest company to reach the unicorn club in the world. They achieved the unicorn status in merely 6 months from the time they were set up. Think of the power of this industry. 6 months, a company is now valued at over $1 billion in the D2C space. So really fascinating story. And given this emergence of the D2C market, a lot of existing and legacy or traditional brands are starting to worry about it, and quite naturally, right? Because they are eating away the share in the market. They're also exploiting, these legacy brands are now also exploiting their own options. They are very desperate in setting up their own online presence and participate in this opportunity. Some of the brands that we've studied are fully committing to D2C, while a lot of others are looking at it more opportunistically at the moment, because a lot of them have the assumption that this probably is a fad and consumers will fall back to offline modes in the post-pandemic world. Some other brands are scaling their D2C presence on the back of massive discounts and creative offers that they're able to come up with. And if you look at all of these brands and what they bring to the table, there are a couple of advantages that the legacy brands have over the D2C brands, which is really in terms of their depth of manufacturing process understanding. They've been doing manufacturing for a number of years, right? Their investment expertise in R&D and marketing, their long-lasting relationships that they have built with the retailers themselves. Right? These are some core advantages that a D2C brand doesn't have. In fact, a lot of legacy brands also have a very loyal base of customers, though you might argue that a bit of that is eroding in the current environment, but they have millions and millions of consumers that have exposure to the brands and products that these legacy companies have been selling in the market. The other thing which is interesting about these legacy brands is that many of them have a very big balance sheets, right? On their side, they have large businesses, they have big balance sheets through which they are also acquiring D2C brands, right? So instead of building their own capabilities on D2C, it's probably easier for some of these balance sheet healthy companies to use the money they have and buy another about to scale or scaled up D2C brand in the market to quickly set up their own presence. And if you look at all of this, right, they are now leveraging this expertise in scaling their overall D2C presence. And our belief is that as long as they can keep a close eye on the customer acquisition cost, they can potentially win over this market against the much younger and probably also inexperienced D2C brands that are finding the traction that they're finding today. So, I mean, the point is, either way you look at it, right? You look at the D2C brands or you look at the legacy brands, right? The need for digitization, the need for e-commerce enablement, the need for commerce OS is quite visible, right? And it's visible in the D2C segment, it's visible in the legacy segment, and it is estimated that in the next 5 years there are going to be 100,000 D2C brands that will emerge in India, and this number actually can be a lot higher if you start also thinking of those mom and pop services and product companies who really don't have a brand today, but they are pretty much selling something online in the exact same construct the way a D2C brand sells in the market, right? So if you start looking at all of this, there'll be definitely 100,000 D2C brands, but there'll be millions of small businesses who will follow the model of D2C and will start selling in the market. And when that happens, we are estimating that it will become 100 to 150 billion GMV market, gross merchandise value market, which means that end customers will invest about $150 billion in buying products and services from D2C or D2C alike brands in the next 5 to 6 years, right? And this is the real big opportunities that web pros like all of you have today, both in the offline incumbent side as well as on the D2C side, as many of these brands start to look at their digital journey to stay competitive. So huge opportunity for the web pro community. And as web pros, our recommendation is that there are 5 things that you need to do to be able to meaningfully participate in this opportunity. First and foremost is really to understand who your prospect customers are, right? Which industries are they going to come in from? Which locations are emerging as D2C hubs in the country? And more importantly, what is the persona of these D2C entrepreneurs? Are these first generation entrepreneurs? Are these millennial, Gen Z, Gen Y entrepreneurs? Who would you end up dealing with? Having a very good understanding of your prospects, I think, is an important step to start with. Having understood the prospective customers, the D2C brands that you want to go after, it is equally important to create offerings that align across the spectrum of e-commerce presence, the transactions, and even scaling of these brands. Right? Having a full suite of offering to be able to work alongside these brands as they scale in their journey, I think is going to be the second big focus area that web pro community will need to develop. The third one, and probably the most important one, is really about investments in talent and skills. And this is an area that you'll need to focus very, very heavily on. The market for talent is suddenly heated up, as all of you know, and it is really not easy to find the talent in today's environment. In that sense, it is important that web pros build a very warm culture of their organization, come up with very creative incentive plans, and more importantly, the need to be razor sharp on the quality of work that you can offer to your employees. Very important area to think of and to consider as you think of scaling your D2C business, D2C e-commerce business. Another important area to focus on is understanding the end customers of the D2C brands better in terms of their personas, their expectations, their experiences, etc., which will really help web pros like all of you in building solutions that are relevant for the base of customers that the D2C brands themselves are going after. So these are customers of the brands themselves that you need to understand very deeply. In that sense, investments in field research, building customer communities, active participation in those communities will come in very handy for web pros in scaling their e-commerce solution footprint. Lastly, web pros should also focus on developing business models around merchant success and not just tool selling. You do not want to come across as another commodity IT services partner for your customers, but should be seen as someone who's truly invested in the success of its customers. Of course, a lot of D2C brands will be small customers to begin with, but the real opportunity is to be seen as their trusted partners in their scaling journey, which can unlock significant opportunities for Webpro in the not so distant future. It is indeed a great time to be in this industry, and I wish you all the very best to all of you. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any audience questions at this point.
So I do see quite a few questions in the chat window, and you can feel free to continue to share your questions. I'll try and pick as many as I can, and I'll try and respond, to the questions. Let me start with the first question. The attendee has not shared his name, but the question is that with more and more brands shifting to the D2C model, there is a growing competition among the brands across categories. So on what basis should these brands differentiate themselves from some of the others in the same category? I think it's a great question. In fact, this is something that I tried covering in the keynote presentation as well. There are two lenses through which, if you are choosing to be a D2C brand, there are two lenses through which you need to think of the differentiation. One is at a overall level, right? Your proposition in terms of either a product or a service that you're selling. It has to have certain element, at least a couple of elements, including the novelty of it, the way you deliver the experience to the customer. Sometimes it could be all about sustainable products that the customers are really asking for these days. Sometimes it could just be about packaging that is very attractive to the customers, and things like those. Right? So it's like common minimum requirements in terms of what a D2C brand need to be able to show up better compared to traditional legacy brands that are operating in the same space. But within the space itself, within the D2C brand itself, you would recall there was this one slide where I talked about different industry segments like food and beverage, like jewelry, like home furnishing. There are many unique ways in which brands have kind of stayed ahead of competition. If you think of the boat example, the whole emphasis on user feedback-based design, right, is a key driver in terms of making them a stand-out company compared to most of the other competitors in that segment. The fact that they decided to keep design and manufacturing closer to them and not really depend on third parties, and just operate like a marketing company itself. The fact that they invested quite heavily in, capturing the design part of the value chain and keeping it closer to them was a unique differentiator. I talked about home furnishing. Again, it's an area that, specifically in India, people do have this aspiration to have their own houses built, but the skill set to be able to do that is not commodity, right? And therefore, brands who are in the D2C space, if they are trying to augment their offerings with managed services, we have seen better results for those kind of brands in terms of the market acceleration that they've really seen, right? Even beauty and personal care, for example, like I said, the differentiator really is in information. A lot of people don't know how to select the right products and for what segment of the beauty would a certain type of product really fit in. And D2C brands are leveraging a very a content-oriented strategy to bridge the information arbitrage and really stand out in their own consulting way and educating customers in terms of what is right for them and what is not, right? And those are a couple of examples that come to mind. Obviously, D2C is a new space. Like I said, many brands in this space are very, very young, and they are by and large inexperienced, both in terms of building and scaling the business, but even more importantly, in terms of understanding the customer themselves, understanding their end customers in details. Brands which are able to bridge the two, right? Brands which are able to kind of cross the barrier around their inexperience and invest more heavily in understanding what their customers are really looking for and aligning everything in both on the front end and the operation side to be able to deliver on that experience is something that will define the winners and losers in my view in this particular category, right? So that's the way I would look at the differentiation between brands in the same category. I think the second question that I'm also getting is quite related, where it's all about the USP that the D2C model companies should look at. So I think between the two scenarios that I talked about, which is the common minimums, and then depending on the categories that you're operating in, there are certain unique differentiators that you need to look at. I think the interesting part is that both in the global markets and India market, there's increasing acceptance of these brands, right? So there's increasing acceptance in the sense of people are more willing to try them out. People are willing to give chances to the D2C companies. I've been buying, like I said in the presentation as well, I've been buying a lot of D2C brands. A lot of times they're really good, sometimes they're not so good, right? But because I am interested in this space, because I am closely observing this, I am still going for repeat purchases on brands that may not have delivered the full experience. But that, I think, as an opportunity, as a sector, as something that's getting increasing acceptance in the market, I think it's clearly happening. And I think so long as brands are able to define their differentiators in the way I just explained about, I think we will see a definitive growth in this segment. I think that there's a question someone has also asked in terms of the new segments where D2C might emerge, and I would say that we have just started, right? I think there are many segments, right, which are not still on the D2C bandwagon, and definitely a lot of product categories where D2C will start picking up. But I am even more excited about the services industry, right? If you think of education, if you think of content services, even fitness services, for example, what this pandemic has really done is again increase the acceptance of service delivery in a digital model. And that's the next wave where I would believe that many D2C brands will start coming up as well. India is obviously a services oriented economy, both from a consumption and export standpoint. Manufacturing contribution still lesser. Even from that perspective, I would say a lot of categories in the services segment, salon services, spa services, even doctor services, parts of the value chain, the business value chain, might see some adoption of the D2C scenarios in the services segment. So I would say that's the other category that will at a macro level, the whole services category is the one where we might see a lot of traction. Like I said, I think purely from a brand perspective, our estimates are that there'll be 100,000 brands. But if you include the non-brands, right, which are like Soho, very small businesses, individuals are trying to create a product and selling it to people, or trying to come up with a content service, or a yoga teacher who's trying to sell that service to both Indian customers and global customers. If you start looking at that, right, which may not necessarily have a brand association to itself, but they're still selling services in the same model, I think that's the other sector, right? That's the other category, which is non-branded category, but a lot of services, a lot of products that will start shipping in the D2C model. And I'm very bullish on that, because in many ways that will create the funnel for the brands that will get created in India. The 100,000 brands that we are projecting will get created. So this funnel of a lot of these small businesses trying to, both in the products and services segment, trying to go after the market opportunity will eventually become the funnel to create branded products and services coming out in that ecosystem. So in that sense, those are the areas in which I would imagine the growth would happen in the D2C segment. I think there's a question around legacy D2C brands like Home Shop 18 and Naptol. And the question really is, why did these brands fail, right? So I think in many ways, some of them were actually not truly D2C. They were still aggregators. They were taking products from wherever and they were selling. They were not creating in its original from anything. So from the lens of what we have looked at, these companies probably wouldn't really fit. But even when I look at these companies and when I look at the journey of these companies, in fact, at some point I was buying a few products from Naptol myself. I think the primary reason that they lost out in the market was probably 2 or 3 folds. One, they were ahead of their time. So they were present in the market at a time where e-commerce wasn't really a big phenomena. And maybe it was the timing issue that wasn't on their side. But more importantly, I think they failed, in my view, on two counts outside of the timing. The fact that a lot of vendors through whom they were sourcing products, they were very unhappy in terms of the money distribution that was happening. There were a lot of fraud related complaints that were raised against at least Home Shop 18 that's available in the public domain. Similarly, Naptol had a lot of issues in vendor management at the back end, and it all invariably also affected the customer experience. We heard a lot of complaints in terms of the quality of products being shipped to the customers. Even the type of products that were shipped were very different from what the customers were really ordering. So I think they failed to capture the vendor ecosystem, and they failed to capture the experience that today is like a common minimum, right? People want really good experiences in terms of right from product trials to product delivery to customer support to returns. People want end-to-end experience, and maybe at the time these companies were operating at scale in India, they were not probably investing enough in the entire value chain to be able to deliver on these experiences. I know we're running out of time, but maybe we'll just take a couple of quick other questions. I think there's a question around things that web pros should keep in mind while helping the D2C clients. I think I gave the entire playbook in terms of investing time in understanding who you want to go after, creating offerings that may align to them, investing in talent, which is a very hard problem to solve these days. But more importantly, coming up with business models that are not transactional only, right? So really, truly investing in the success of the customers, I think is going to be extremely important, because there are a lot of choices that D2C brands have, right? Most of the IT services companies are lining up. The moment they see a D2C brand scale, there are a lot of IT services companies who line up, and it's going to get quite heated up from a competition standpoint. So other than service quality, other than the fact that you have the brightest talent and you are optimally placed in terms of your cost efficiencies, etc., the other big element there is in terms of the business model that you construct with the D2C brand, and truly demonstrate that you're invested in the success of these brands. I think is going to be extremely important. So that's an area I would recommend that people should really focus on. And then I think there's maybe I'll take the last question: why no home service D2C was not stable and not running closely to end customer? I'm not sure if I follow the question fully, so we will take the other one. I think the other question people are asking is D2C is a good concept. What are the other alternates? I think there are, if you notice on the evolution slide that I talked about, there have been a lot of options, right? In terms of digital commerce that has been there in the past. There's been discovery platforms, there's been aggregator platforms, there's the social commerce. People are trying to work with vertical specific aggregators like a Zomato, Swiggy, Urban Clap, Urban Company, and so on. So there have been many models on which people have experimented, and there have been a lot of success stories that have been created in every single type of these models. I think, in my view, we have come to a point where the customer doesn't care about the model, right? The customer cares about the end consumer, like you and me. We care about the experience that we get. We care about the choices we get. We care about the flexibility that we get with the brands, right? And so long as any of these models are able to deliver on that, I think any of those models is going to work out really well. Today, the problem is all about these platforms, if I can say so, are struggling in terms of the margin or the margin takeaways they have from the merchant. So I think who gets to capture the value the most and who gets to capture the money the most, I think those are unsolved questions across all the models of evolution that we've seen. And I think depending on who cracks it better, right? And today D2C brands seem to be doing a very good job in bridging some of those gaps, but the battle is not lost. I would also believe that a lot of legacy brands can also catch up in this model, because at the end of the day, if you're concerned about customers, if you're concerned about, if you're truly invested into your customer success as like consumer success, I think any of these models will eventually scale, right? So D2C is obviously one area that we are closely observing, but the other models are also equally prominent at the moment, and they have good prospects and opportunities in terms of at least the next foreseeable future. They will continue to scale as well. So I think we are at time. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope you had some takeaways, and happy to connect offline and answer any other questions as well. But thank you so much for being here today.